They say you never truly know the person sleeping next to you until the storm hits. For Sarah Jenkins, the storm didn't come from the sky. It came in a tailored Italian suit, checking a Rolex while she fought for her life. Imagine looking into the eyes of the man you've loved for a decade, the father of your unborn twins, and seeing nothing but a calculation. He didn't just leave her. He discarded her like a liability on a balance sheet. But Marcus Thorne forgot one thing. Nature abhors a vacuum. Where he left a void, his greatest rival saw an opportunity. This is the story of how a billionaire's cruelty created an unstoppable force, and how the family he threw away became the empire that would bring him to his knees. The silence in the private suite at St. Jude's Medical Center was broken only by the rhythmic, taunting beep of the cardiac monitor and the relentless lashing of rain against the reinforced glass. It was a cold November night in Chicago, the kind that seeped into the bones, but the chill in the room had nothing to do with the weather. Sarah Jenkins lay pale against the starch-white sheets, her breathing shallow and labored. Her face, usually vibrant and quick to smile, was drawn tight with pain. Preeclampsia had set in aggressively at 32 weeks. Her body was failing, violently rejecting the pregnancy that she and Marcus had spent 3 years and a small fortune in IVF treatments to achieve. Marcus Thorne stood by the window, his back to her. He was silhouette of sharp angles and bespoke wool, staring out at the blurred lights of the city. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at his reflection. At 38, Marcus was the CEO of Thorne Logistics, a man on the precipice of becoming a global titan. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than the nurses' combined annual salaries, for the third time in 5 minutes. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice was a fractured whisper. He turned, but not fully. His eyes, the color of cold steel, didn't soften. "Rest, Sarah. The doctor said you need to keep your blood pressure down." "It hurts," she murmured, her hand drifting instinctively to the swell of her stomach. "Something feels wrong. Don't leave tonight." Marcus sighed, a sound of impatience rather than empathy. He walked to the bedside, picking up his leather briefcase. "We've been over this. The Zurich merger is tomorrow morning. If I'm not there to sign the papers with the Swiss delegation, the deal collapses. That's $4 billion, Sarah. The future of the company." "I'm your wife," she gasped, a fresh wave of pain contorting her features. "These are your children. The doctor said it could go either way tonight." Marcus looked down at her. In his mind, he was already running the probabilities. The chief of medicine had pulled him aside an hour ago. "The prognosis is grim, Mr. Thorne. Her kidneys are shutting down. The twins are in distress. We may have to choose between the mother and the children, and frankly, we might lose all three." To Marcus, Sarah was no longer a partner. She was a sinking asset. He had loved her, once, in his way, but he loved winning more. And waiting here for a death that seemed inevitable felt like a waste of time he didn't have. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Jessica. He didn't answer it, but the vibration steeled his resolve. Jessica Sterling was waiting in the private jet on the tarmac. Jessica, who was the daughter of a senator. Jessica, who didn't have swollen ankles or failing kidneys, but connections that could double his political reach. "I have hired the best specialists in the state," Marcus said, his voice smooth, practiced. He leaned down and placed a perfunctory kiss on her clammy forehead. It felt like a seal of closure. "I have to go, Sarah. I'm doing this for us, for the legacy." "No," she cried out, attempting to grip his sleeve, but her fingers were too weak. She slid off the silk of his suit. "Marcus, please, if you leave, don't come back." He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. He looked back one last time, his expression unreadable, masked by ambition. "Goodbye, Sarah." The heavy door clicked shut. Sarah stared at the wood grain, her heart shattering louder than the thunder outside. The isolation was immediate and terrifying. Then, the pain spiked, a tearing, searing heat in her abdomen. The monitor's steady beep accelerated into a frantic alarm. Nurses rushed in, a blur of blue scrubs. "BP is crashing! She's seizing! Get the crash cart! Page Dr. Evans!" As consciousness faded into a dark, swirling tunnel, Sarah's last thought wasn't of death. It was a promise. "If I live, you will regret this." The VIP wing of St. Jude's was usually reserved for politicians and sports stars, a quiet sanctuary of moneyed suffering. Tonight, however, the hallway outside room 404 was chaotic. Elias Vane stood near the nurse's station, leaning heavily on a cane made of black walnut. At 42, Elias was a figure of urban legend in the business world. He was the owner of Vane Enterprises, a conglomerate that rivaled Thorne Logistics in every sector. But where Marcus Thorne was a shark, flashy, aggressive, constantly moving, Elias was a whale, massive, submerged, and powerful enough to capsize ships without surfacing. He was there visiting his grandmother, the matriarch of the Vane family, in the suite down the hall. But the commotion had drawn him out. He had seen Marcus Thorne exit room 404 minutes ago. He had seen the way Marcus walked, brisk, unburdened, checking his phone with a small, triumphant smile as he typed a message. Elias knew that look. It was the look of a man who had just cut loose dead weight. "Mr. Vane, please, step back," a flustered nurse said, rushing past with bags of O-negative blood. "Who is in that room?" Elias asked, his voice a low rumble, commanding despite the chaos. The nurse hesitated, but Elias Vane was a major donor to the hospital. "Mrs. Thorne, it's bad. Placental abruption. Multi-organ failure." Elias's eyes narrowed. He knew Sarah Jenkins. Not intimately, but he knew of her. She was the brilliant architect who had designed the Thorne headquarters, the very building Marcus used to project his power. Elias had tried to poach her years ago, but she had been fiercely loyal to her husband. "Where is Marcus?" Elias asked, though he suspected the answer. The head nurse, a formidable woman named Margaret, looked up from the computer terminal, her face pale with rage. "He left against medical advice, and, Mr. Vane, there's a problem." "What problem?" "The hospital administration just got a call from Thorne's financial office. They've flagged the insurance on file. It seems Mr. Thorne initiated a separation of assets protocol an hour ago. He's frozen the joint accounts. We can't authorize the emergency surgery for the infants without a guarantor. It's protocol." Elias felt a cold fury rise in his chest. It was one thing to be ruthless in the boardroom. Elias had destroyed plenty of companies. But this? This was abandoning a drowning woman after puncturing the life raft. It was villainy of the lowest order. "Screw protocol," Elias growled. He stepped forward, pulling a black titanium American Express card from his coat pocket. He slammed it onto the counter with a metallic clatter. "Charge it," he ordered. "Everything. The surgery, the NICU, the specialists. Fly in a nephrologist from Hopkins if you have to. I don't care if it costs $10 million. Margaret blinked, stunned. "Mr. Vane, are you sure? The liability—" "I said charge it," Elias roared, causing the hallway to fall silent. He lowered his voice, his dark eyes burning. "Save her. Save the children. And remove the name Thorne from the visitor list. If that man tries to step foot on this floor again, I want security to break his legs. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Margaret nodded, galvanized by his authority. She grabbed the card and ran toward the operating theater. Elias moved to the large observation window, looking into the surgical suite. He watched as they transferred Sarah onto the gurney. She looked small, broken, her blonde hair matted with sweat. He remembered meeting her 5 years ago at a charity gala. Marcus had been bragging about his stock prices to a circle of sycophants, while Sarah had stood off to the side, discussing structural integrity and tensile strength with an engineering student. She had been genuine, Authentic. A rare diamond in a sea of cubic zirconia. Marcus didn't deserve her. And as of tonight, Elias decided, Marcus wouldn't have her. 3 hours later, the double doors swung open. Dr. Evans emerged, looking exhausted, stripping off bloody gloves. Elias straightened up, ignoring the ache in his bad leg, a souvenir from a car accident that had taken his own wife years ago. Well, it was a war zone, Dr. Evans admitted, rubbing his eyes. She flatlined twice. We had to perform an emergency C-section followed by a hysterectomy to stop the bleeding. Her kidneys are weak, but she's stable. The children? A boy and a girl, premature, critical, but fighters. They're in the NICU. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Does she know? She's sedated. She won't wake up for another day, maybe 2. Elias nodded. He walked over to the window looking into the NICU. He saw the 2 tiny incubators, wires and tubes creating a spider web of life support around 2 fragile beings. Leo and Mia, Elias whispered, giving them names because their father hadn't bothered to. He pulled out his phone. He dialed his chief of security, a former Mossad agent named Silas. Mr. Vane? Silas, I need a legal team at St. Jude's Hospital by morning. Family law, heavy hitters. And get the PR team ready. I want a media blackout on Sarah Thorne's condition. As far as the world knows, she died on that table. Sir, what's the play? Silas asked. Elias stared at the twins, his reflection superimposed over them in the glass. Marcus Thorne thinks he's free. He thinks he's going to land in Zurich, sign his deal, and start a new life with his mistress while his wife becomes a tragedy in the obituary section. Elias gripped the handle of his cane. Let him think he's won. Let him build his tower to the heavens, because when I'm done with him, Silas, he won't just fall. He's going to burn. Consciousness returned to Sarah not as a flood, but as a slow, agonizing tide. The first thing she felt was the emptiness in her womb, a hollow ache that made her gasp before her eyes even fluttered open. Easy, Sarah, you're safe. The voice was deep, unfamiliar, yet strangely anchoring. Sarah blinked, the harsh hospital lights adjusting to reveal a man sitting in the armchair beside her bed. He held a cane in one hand and a tablet in the other. He looked like a king in exile, tired, but possessing a latent, dangerous power. Who? Her throat felt like sandpaper. Where is Marcus? Elias Vane didn't flinch. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Marcus isn't here, Sarah. He's in Zurich. The memories crashed into her. The rain. The cold look in Marcus's eyes. Goodbye, Sarah. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, causing the monitors to quicken their rhythm. My babies? She choked out, trying to sit up, but the pain in her incision forced her back. Alive, Elias said quickly, his voice softening. A boy and a girl. They are in the NICU, but the doctors say they are fighters. They have your resilience. Sarah closed her eyes, tears leaking out. He left us. He really left us. He did more than leave, Elias said, his tone hardening. He decided there was no point in coddling her. She needed the truth to survive what came next. He initiated a separation of assets. He froze your joint accounts. He refused to authorize the surgery that saved your life. If I hadn't been in the hallway, you would be dead, Sarah. Sarah stared at the ceiling, the betrayal carving a hollow space in her chest where her love for Marcus used to be. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was an annihilation of her reality. The man she had built a life with had calculated her death as an acceptable loss. Why? She whispered. Why did you save me? Because I hate waste, Elias said simply, and because I know what it's like to be discarded by someone who thinks they are a god. He stood up, pacing slowly with his cane. Marcus thinks you died on that table. My team has ensured a media blackout. No obituaries, but no updates either. To the world, and to him, you are a ghost. He stopped at the foot of her bed. You have a choice, Sarah. You can reveal you survived. You can sue him for divorce, fight for scraps of alimony, and spend the next 10 years in court, while he buys judges and drags your name through the mud. Or, Sarah asked, her voice trembling but her eyes drying. Or, Elias said, a dark smile touching his lips. You stay dead, for now. You let him build his empire on the lie. You recover. You raise your children in safety. And while he grows complacent, you grow strong. I have resources, Sarah. I have capital. But I need a visionary. I need the architect who designed Thorn Logistics to help me dismantle it, brick by brick. Sarah looked at her hands. They were shaking. She thought of the twins, fighting for breath in plastic boxes because their father chose a merger over their lives. She thought of the woman she used to be. Trusting. Soft. Supportive. That woman had died last night. She looked up at Elias, and for the first time, the steel in her eyes matched his. I don't want alimony, she said, her voice ice-cold. I want his legacy. Elias nodded, a pact sealed in the sterile air of the hospital room. Then rest, Sarah. The funeral is in 3 days. It would be a shame if you missed it. 5 years later, the sprawling estate on the coast of Maine was invisible from the main road, hidden behind acres of dense pine forest and high-tech security grids. It was a fortress of glass and stone, designed to blend into the cliffs, a masterpiece of modern architecture. Inside the sun-drenched atrium, 5-year-old Leo was meticulously building a skyscraper out of magnetic blocks, while his twin sister, Mia, was sketching on a tablet with a focus that mirrored her mother's. Mom, Leo stole my stylus! Mia shouted, not looking up. Did not. I needed a spire for the tower, Leo shot back. Sarah walked into the room, wiping grease from her hands. At 37, she was unrecognizable from the fragile woman in the hospital bed. Her blonde hair was cut into a sharp, chic bob. She wore tailored trousers and a silk blouse, moving with a predator's grace. But it was her face that had changed the most. The softness of youth had been replaced by a serene, terrifying confidence. Leo, give it back. Structural integrity doesn't rely on theft, Sarah said calmly, trading the stylus for a juice box. Uncle Eli is here? Leo cheered, abandoning the tower as a black helicopter descended onto the private pad outside. Elias Vane walked in moments later, the wind from the rotors still whipping his coat. He looked older, the gray in his beard more pronounced, but his eyes were sharp. Auntie Sarah says we're going to war, Mia said matter-of-factly, looking up from her drawing. Elias chuckled, ruffling her hair. Something like that, little one? He turned to Sarah, his expression shifting to business. It's time. They walked into Sarah's study, a room lined with blueprints and market monitors. On the main screen was a live feed of the global stock market. Thorn Logistics was trading at an all-time high. He's launching the autonomous shipping fleet next week, Elias said, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. The Poseidon Project. He claims it will reduce global shipping costs by 30%. If he succeeds, he monopolizes the Atlantic trade routes. Sarah took the glass, studying the schematics on the screen. Schematics she had helped conceptualize years ago, before Marcus had stolen the credit. The Poseidon software has a flaw, Sarah said, tapping the screen. It relies on a centralized cloud node. Efficient, but vulnerable to localized weather latency. He cut corners on the redundancy servers to save weight and fuel. Typical Marcus, Elias murmured. Short-term gain, long-term catastrophe. I've spent the last 5 years building Aegis, Sarah said, bringing up a new schematic. It was a decentralized logistics network, one that used blockchain for security and biomimicry for routing. It wasn't just better, it was a paradigm shift. But we need a face for Aegis, Elias pointed out. I can't launch it under Vane Enterprises without triggering an antitrust lawsuit from Marcus. And you are legally deceased. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the crashing waves. Sarah Jenkins is dead. But the CEO of Phoenix Holdings is very much alive. She turned back to him. I've created a paper trail, a reclusive investor from Singapore, S.J. Sterling. No photos, just a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Elias raised an eyebrow. Sterling? A little on the nose, using his mistress's last name? Jessica Sterling left him 3 years ago when his stock dipped, Sarah noted dryly. I thought it was poetic. He's haunted by the women he uses. It's time he met the one he couldn't break. The Global Logistics Summit is in Dubai in 2 days, Elias said. Marcus will be there to unveil Poseidon. He's expecting a coronation. Sarah took a sip of the scotch, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Then let's give him a revolution instead. Have the jet ready, Elias. I have a dress to buy. The ballroom of the Burj Al Arab was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, the air thick with the scent of money and expensive perfume. It was the event of the decade for the shipping industry. Marcus Thorne stood at the center of the room, holding a champagne flute, basking in the adoration of his peers. At 43, Marcus was still handsome, but the years of unchecked ambition had hardened him. He looked tired around the eyes, a man constantly looking over his shoulder. Mr. Thorne, the Poseidon Project is revolutionary, a journalist gushed. How did you solve the latency issues? Innovation has no speed limit, Marcus quipped, a rehearsed line. Thorne Logistics doesn't just move goods, we move the future. The lights dimmed. The giant screen on the stage flickered to life. The host announced, and now for the surprise entrant into the autonomous sector, please welcome the representative from Phoenix Holdings. Marcus scoffed, turning to his VP. Phoenix Holdings? Never heard of them. Probably some startup begging for a buyout. But then, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Silence swept through the room, rippling outward like a wave. A woman walked in. She wore a gown of crimson silk that flowed like liquid fire, a stark contrast to the sea of black and navy suits. Her face was partially obscured by a vintage birdcage veil, a bold, avant-garde fashion statement that hid her eyes but revealed the sharp line of her jaw and red lips. She didn't walk, she glided. The crowd parted for her. She ascended the stage, taking the microphone. Her voice was low, modulated but unmistakably commanding. The future isn't about speed, Mr. Thorne, she said, looking directly at Marcus in the front row. It's about endurance. The screen behind her exploded with data. It showed a simulation of the Poseidon fleet stalling in a tropical storm, followed by the Aegis fleet navigating effortlessly through the chaos, using swarm intelligence. Thorne Logistics relies on a fragile spine, she continued. Phoenix Holdings offers a nervous system that cannot be broken. We are offering the Asian and European markets a contract today, 15% cheaper than Thorne, 100% safer. The room erupted. Phones were pulled out. Billions of dollars were shifting in real time. Marcus stood up, his face flushed with anger. He felt the ground shifting beneath him. He marched toward the stage, ignoring security. Who are you? He demanded, shouting over the applause. You're using stolen data. That's my proprietary algorithm. The woman in red looked down at him. For a second, she tilted her head, a gesture so familiar that Marcus felt a ghost walk over his grave. Proprietary? She said into the mic, her voice dripping with mockery. An architect I once knew told me that a building is only as strong as its foundation. You built your empire on sand, Marcus. She turned and walked off the stage, disappearing behind the heavy velvet curtains before he could get a closer look. Marcus stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. The voice, the cadence. It was impossible. Sarah was dead. He had seen the death certificate Elias Vane's lawyers had sent over. He had seen the urn. Mr. Thorne! Mr. Thorne! Is it true Phoenix Holdings has outbid you for the Rotterdam port? A reporter shouted, shoving a microphone in his face. Marcus shoved the reporter aside and ran backstage. He burst into the hallway, but it was empty. The only trace of the woman in red was a faint scent lingering in the air. Vanilla and rain, Sarah's perfume. Marcus staggered back against the wall, breathing heavily. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking. Find out who owns Phoenix Holdings, he barked at his private investigator. I want a name, I want a face, and I want them destroyed. As he hung up, he looked down. Lying on the floor where the woman had stood was a single object. He picked it up. It was a small white Lego brick. The blood drained from his face. He remembered the last Christmas before everything fell apart. He had bought a set for the nursery they never got to use. The war had begun, and the dead were coming for him. Chicago was caught in the grip of a relentless winter, mirroring the chill that had settled over the executive suite of Thorne Logistics. Marcus Thorne paced the length of his office, the Persian rug muffling his frantic footsteps. On his mahogany desk lay a dismantled Lego brick and a forensic accounting report that made no sense. "Explain this to me again," Marcus snapped, turning to his new CFO, a nervous man named Arthur who was sweating despite the room's aggressive heating. It's a pincer movement, sir," Arthur stammered, adjusting his glasses. "Phoenix Holdings isn't just undercutting our shipping rates. They are buying our debt. Every time one of our short-term loans comes up for renewal with the banks, a subsidiary of Phoenix steps in and buys the note." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "Who is funding them? Who is S.J. Sterling? I've had private investigators scouring Singapore, London, and New York. This person doesn't exist." "They exist on paper, sir. Shell companies nested inside shell companies. But the money is real, and because they hold 40% of our debt now, they can trigger a recall if our stock price drops below a certain threshold." Marcus walked to the window, staring out at the gray skyline. The same skyline he had looked at the night he left Sarah. For months, he had been plagued by insomnia. Every time he closed his eyes, he smelled vanilla and rain. He saw the woman in the red dress. "It's Elias," Marcus muttered, his eyes narrowing. "It has to be. He's the only one with the capital and the grudge." Vane Enterprises has publicly denied any affiliation, Arthur noted. In fact, Elias Vane has been semi-retired for years. Rumor has it he's raising a family. He's been seen at parks, schools. He's soft. "Elias isn't soft," Marcus hissed. "He's patient. Get out. Fix the numbers. If the stock drops, you're fired." As Arthur fled the room, Marcus unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a file his PI had delivered that morning. It contained surveillance photos of Elias Vane's estate in Maine. Most were useless. Blurry shots of high walls and security gates. But one photo, taken with a long-range telephoto lens from a boat off the coast, showed a figure on the balcony. It was a woman. Her back was turned, but she was painting on an easel. The posture, the tilt of the head, it was hauntingly familiar. And running past her, a blur of motion, were two small children. Marcus picked up a magnifying glass. He focused on the children. A boy and a girl. Blonde hair. His heart skipped a beat. A cold, impossible thought took root in his mind. Twins. He grabbed his coat. He didn't care about the board meeting. He didn't care about the shareholders. He needed to know who was living in Elias Vane's house. The library at the Vane estate was a sanctuary of old books and crackling fire. 6-year-old Leo was sitting on the rug, engaged in a fierce chess match with Elias. Mia was curled up in a large leather armchair, reading an encyclopedia about marine biology. "Check," Leo announced triumphantly, moving his knight. Elias chuckled, stroking his beard. "Aggressive, Leo, but you left your flank exposed." Elias moved his bishop. "Checkmate." Leo groaned, falling back onto the rug. "You always win, Uncle Eli." "Only because you play to capture, not to control," Elias said gently. "Capturing pieces is satisfying, but controlling the board is how you win the war. Your mother knows this." Sarah entered the room, carrying a tray of hot cocoa. She smiled at the scene, but her eyes were tight with worry. She had received a text from her security team 5 minutes ago. "Breach at the perimeter gate. Black SUV. Thorne Logistics plates." "Kids," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "Take your cocoa to the media room. Put on your headphones. Uncle Eli and I need to discuss business." The twins, sensing the shift in the air, obeyed immediately. They were smart children, raised in a house of secrets. They knew that when Mom used her CEO voice, they listened. Once the heavy oak doors clicked shut, Sarah turned to Elias. "He's here." Elias struggled to stand. gripping his cane. His health had been declining lately, a heart condition he refused to slow down for. "He's bold. Or desperate. Both," Sarah said, moving to the security monitors hidden behind a painting. On the screen, they saw Marcus Thorne standing at the intercom by the main gate. He was shouting at the camera, looking disheveled. "I know you're in there, Elias! I want to see her! Open the gate!" Sarah watched the man she had once loved. He looked like a stranger. The arrogance was replaced by a manic energy. "He suspects," Elias said quietly, standing beside her. "If he sees you, Sarah, the game changes. He will try to take the children. He has the best lawyers money can buy. He will claim he never knew they survived. He will paint you as a kidnapper." "He abandoned them to die," Sarah whispered, her hand resting on the panic button that would summon the local police. "The law requires proof," Elias reminded her, "and he has billions to manufacture his own truth. We aren't ready for a custody battle. We need to break him financially first so he has no power left to wield." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, her heart hammering. Elias pressed a button on the intercom, distorting his voice. "Mr. Thorne, you are trespassing." "I saw them, Elias." Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker. "I saw the children. Who are they? Is she alive? Did she survive?" Sarah stiffened. This was the moment. Elias looked at Sarah. She nodded slowly. "My private life is none of your concern, Marcus," Elias said coolly. "Those are my godchildren. Their mother is a close associate. Now, leave, or I release the footage of you harassing a retired man to the press. Stock prices are already volatile, aren't they?" Marcus stared at the camera lens, his chest heaving. He looked defeated, but his eyes burned with a dangerous resolve. He spat on the ground, turned, and got back into his SUV. Sarah exhaled, leaning against the desk. "He won't stop. He's going to dig until he finds a DNA trail. Then we speed up the timeline," Elias said, his face grim. "We stop chipping away at his company. We go for the throat. It's time for the hostile takeover." 2 weeks later, the annual Chicago Tech Gala was held at the Art Institute. It was neutral ground, a place where rivals drank champagne and pretended to be civil. Marcus arrived alone. He looked thinner, his suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. The rumors of Thorne Logistics' impending liquidity crisis were swirling. He needed a lifeline. He needed an investor. He was cornered near the Impressionist wing by a group of reporters. "Mr. Thorne, is it true Phoenix Holdings has acquired a controlling interest in your Asian supply chain?" "No comment," Marcus growled, pushing past them. He retreated to the balcony, needing air. The night was cold. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" Marcus froze. He turned around. Standing in the shadows was the woman from Dubai, the woman in red. Tonight, she wore black velvet, a masquerade mask covering the upper half of her face. "You," Marcus whispered. He stepped forward. "Who are you? Take off the mask." "Names are just labels, Marcus," she said, her voice unrecognizable, distorted slightly by a voice modulator she wore as a choker. "I'm here to offer you a deal. A lifeboat." "I don't need your charity," Marcus spat. "Don't you?" She stepped into the light, though her face remained hidden. "Your creditors are calling. Your Poseidon ships are rusting in port because they can't insure them. I'm offering to buy Thorne Logistics, the whole thing, at 120% of the current market value." Marcus laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You want my legacy? I built that company from nothing." "You built it on the backs of people you used and discarded," she countered smoothly. "Accept the buyout, Marcus. Take the money, go to Zurich, live the life you always wanted, alone." "And if I refuse?" "Then tomorrow morning Phoenix Holdings dumps the debt we hold. We flood the market with your stock. You will be bankrupt by noon. You won't walk away with billions. You'll walk away with nothing but the suit on your back." Marcus stared at her. The threat was credible. He knew the numbers. He was checkmated. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? It's personal, isn't it?" The woman stepped closer. She reached up and unclasped the mask. For a moment, time stopped. Marcus looked at the face of the woman he had left to die. She was older, sharper, colder. But it was her. "Sarah," he breathed, the world tilting on its axis. "But the machines, the flatline." "Sarah Jenkins died that night," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I'm what survived." Marcus reached out, his hand trembling. "And the babies?" "They are thriving," Sarah said, stepping back out of his reach. "And they have a father. A real one. Elias raised them while you chased your stock options." The revelation hit Marcus harder than bankruptcy. He had children. He had a son and a daughter. And Elias Vane, his nemesis, was raising them. "I'll take them back," Marcus snarled, the shock turning instantly to entitlement. "They are mine. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you." Sarah smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Marcus had ever seen. "You have no money to sue, Marcus. You have no reputation. And as of 5 minutes ago," she checked her phone, "the board of directors just voted to oust you as CEO. They accepted my tender offer." Marcus patted his pockets for his phone. It was buzzing incessantly. Messages from his lawyer, his VP, his bank. "Hostile takeover confirmed. Board vote unanimous. Security is escorting you out." He looked up, panic seizing his chest. "You can't do this!" he screamed. "I just did," Sarah said calmly. She turned to walk away. "Elias sends his regards." "Oh, and Marcus?" He looked up, tears of rage in his eyes. "Don't come near my children. If you do, I won't just take your company. I'll take your freedom." She walked back into the gala, leaving him alone on the balcony in the freezing cold. Exactly where he had left her 7 years ago. But the war wasn't over. Marcus Thorne was down, but a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. As he watched her leave, he didn't feel regret. He felt a dark, twisting need for revenge that eclipsed everything else. He wiped his face. He still had one card left to play, a secret stash of offshore accounts he had hidden from everyone. Even Sarah. "You think you've won," he whispered to the empty air. "But you just woke the devil. The collapse of a titan is rarely silent." For Marcus Thorne, it was a cacophony of ringing phones, shouting lawyers, and the incessant flash of paparazzi cameras camped outside his penthouse. He was a pariah. The board had stripped him of his title, his access cards, and his dignity, but they hadn't stripped him of his rage. Locked in the panic room of his penthouse, Marcus sat surrounded by servers and encrypted drives. He was tapping into the Shadow Fund, $50 million in untraceable cryptocurrency he had siphoned off during the Zurich merger years ago. It was his rainy day fund, his nuclear option. "Mr. Thorne, the transfer is complete," a distorted voice said over the secure line. "Good," Marcus rasped, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept in 3 days. "Initiate Phase 2. I want the extraction team ready by tonight. If she wants to play war, I'll show her what a real invasion looks like." He wasn't going to sue for custody. That would take years. Marcus was going to take the children. He had convinced himself it was a rescue mission. In his twisted narrative, Sarah was the villain, a woman who had faked her death to steal his heirs. He would take Leo and Mia to a non-extradition country, raise them to hate their mother, and rebuild his empire with their legacy. Meanwhile, at the Vane estate in Maine, the atmosphere was tense. Elias was bedridden. The stress of the hostile takeover had triggered a severe angina episode. He lay in the master bedroom, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a rhythm far too slow for Sarah's liking. "You need to rest, Eli," Sarah said, adjusting his pillows. She looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the gala fading into a cold dread. "He's quiet," Elias wheezed, gripping her hand. "Marcus is never quiet. It means he's planning something." "We have security," Sarah assured him. "Silas has doubled the perimeter guard. The twins are safe." But even as she said it, a chill ran down her spine. Sarah walked to the window. The storm that had been threatening the coast for days had finally broken. Rain lashed against the glass, turning the world into a blur of gray and black. Down in the security booth at the main gate, Silas was watching the monitors. He frowned. 3 of the perimeter sensors in the North Woods had just gone offline. Probably a fallen branch, his deputy muttered, sipping coffee. In this wind? Silas narrowed his eyes. Maybe, or maybe not. Send a drone to check Sector 4. Before the deputy could comply, the lights in the booth flickered and died. A localized EMP. We're under attack! Silas shouted into his radio. Code red! Lock down the house! But the radio was dead. The static hiss was the only sound as shadows moved swiftly through the trees, wearing tactical gear and night vision goggles. Marcus Thorne hadn't hired lawyers. He had hired a paramilitary extraction team. Inside the house, the emergency lights bathed the hallways in an eerie red glow. Sarah didn't need a radio to know what was happening. She heard the shattering of glass in the conservatory. Mom? Leo stood in the hallway, holding his teddy bear, his eyes wide with fear. Mia was behind him, clutching a book. Listen to me, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her heart. She knelt down, grabbing them both by the shoulders. We are going to play the quiet game, just like we practiced. You go to the panic room in the library, you lock the door. You do not open it for anyone but me or Uncle Eli. Do you understand? Is it the bad man? Mia whispered. Go! Sarah urged, pushing them towards the hidden panel behind the bookcase. As the children scrambled inside and the mechanism locked, Sarah stood up. She wasn't an action hero. She was a mother. She grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. She wouldn't let him get near that door. Footsteps echoed on the marble stairs. Heavy boots. Clear left, clear right. Men with rifles swept into the room. Sarah stood her ground, raising the poker. Don't shoot her, a voice commanded from the shadows. I want her to watch. Marcus walked into the library. He was wearing a raincoat, dripping wet, holding a pistol. He looked like a madman, his veneer of civilization completely washed away. Where are they, Sarah? He asked, his voice deceptively calm. Gone, Sarah lied. I sent them away days ago. You're too late. Marcus laughed. You're a terrible liar. I tracked their iPads. They're in the house. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the bookcase. Ah, the old hidden room trick. Elias always was a cliché. He walked toward the bookcase. Marcus, stop! Sarah screamed, lunging at him. He backhanded her without looking, sending her crashing into the coffee table. Sarah tasted blood. She struggled to get up, but one of the mercenaries pinned her down. Open it, Sarah, Marcus said, aiming the gun at the lock mechanism, or I start burning this house down room by room. You'll kill them, she sobbed. I'm saving them, Marcus roared, his composure cracking. I'm saving them from a life of mediocrity with a traitor. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. It wasn't Marcus. Marcus spun around. Standing in the doorway was Elias Vane. He was pale, sweating, leaning heavily on the doorframe, but in his hand was a vintage Colt 1911. Get away from my family, Elias growled. You should be dead, old man, Marcus sneered, leveling his weapon at Elias. Look at you, you can barely stand. I don't need to stand to aim, Elias said. The standoff was broken by the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. The police. Silas had managed to trigger the silent alarm before the power was cut. We have to go, boss, the lead mercenary said, checking his watch. Cops are 2 minutes out. Grab the kids, Marcus screamed, losing control. No time, the mercenary shouted. We leave now or we go to federal prison. The mercenaries abandoned Marcus, running for the back exit. They were professionals. They knew when a job was botched. Marcus was left alone. He looked at the panic room, then at Sarah, then at Elias. He realized it was over. He couldn't take the children. But his hatred was so consuming, he couldn't leave empty-handed. He raised his gun, aiming not at Elias, but at Sarah. If I can't have them, he whispered, you can't either. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Sarah flinched, waiting for the pain. But it never came. Elias had moved. With a burst of strength he shouldn't have possessed, he had thrown himself in front of Sarah. The bullet caught him in the chest. Elias crumbled to the floor. No! Sarah screamed, scrambling toward him. Marcus stood frozen, the gun smoking in his hand. He looked at Elias's body, then at his own hand. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him. He wasn't just a corporate shark anymore. He was a murderer. Sirens blared in the driveway. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Marcus dropped the gun. He fell to his knees, his hands on his head, laughing hysterically as the police stormed the room. The funeral of Elias Vane was attended by heads of state, captains of industry, and the weeping staff of the Vane estate. It was held on a bluff overlooking the ocean, the spot where he had taught Leo to play chess. Sarah stood at the graveside, holding the hands of her children. She wore black, but her head was high. She wasn't crying. Elias had made her promise not to cry. Don't mourn me, Sarah. Avenge me by living well. Marcus Thorne was currently in a maximum security holding cell, awaiting trial for attempted murder, kidnapping, and corporate fraud. The evidence found on his servers had exposed decades of money laundering. He would never see the outside of a prison cell again, but the victory felt hollow. Mom? Leo tugged on her hand. Is Uncle Eli really gone? Sarah knelt down, looking into eyes that were so like Marcus's, yet filled with Elias's kindness. His body is gone, Leo. But look around. She pointed to the crowd, to the workers from the factories Elias had saved, to the scholarship students he had funded, to the world he had impacted. Everything he built is still here, Sarah said. And the lessons he taught you? Those are part of you now. As long as you remember to control the board, not just capture the pieces, he's with you. After the funeral, Sarah returned to the estate. She walked into the study, now her study. She sat at the massive oak desk. There was a letter waiting for her. Elias's lawyer had delivered it that morning. Sarah, if you are reading this, I finally lost the game. Don't worry about me. I've been living on borrowed time since my wife died. You and the twins gave me a second act I didn't deserve. I have left everything to you. Vane Enterprises, the estate, the assets. Merge it with Thorne Logistics. Build the empire we talked about. But remember, an empire is only as good as the people it protects. Marcus forgot that. He thought power was about height, how high you can build your tower. But power is about depth, how deep your roots go. You have deep roots, Sarah. You will weather any storm. Raise them well. Sarah folded the letter. She stood up and walked to the window. The sun was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the rough, beautiful coast of Maine. She picked up her phone. Get me the board, she said to her assistant. We're rebranding. No more Thorne Logistics. No more Vane Enterprises. What should we call the new company, ma'am? Sarah looked at the twins playing on the lawn, chasing each other in the sunlight. Call it Meridian, she said, because it's a new day. And so, Marcus Thorne learned the hardest lesson of all. You can own all the money in the world, but you can't buy loyalty, and you certainly can't buy a legacy. He died a prisoner of his own greed, while the family he abandoned built a future brighter than anything he could have imagined. Sarah proved that true power isn't about ruthlessness. It's about resilience. It's about standing up when the world tells you to stay down. This story reminds us that our choices echo through generations. Are you building a tower for yourself or a foundation for others? If this story moved you, if you felt Sarah's pain and her triumph, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next saga. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus deserved forgiveness, or did he get exactly what was coming to him? I'll be reading your replies. Until next time, keep turning the page.